Well, hey, Kyle, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, man. Glad to be back.
Yeah, it's great having you. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. This is something that my wife and I are pretty passionate about as well, as far as a topic and in our own lives. And, thankfully, having some really good mentorship early on in my life, it was somewhere where I was able to kind of maintain it under control, because I know as I look around, I see for a lot of people, man, their finances and things like this is an area where it seems to get out of control really quick, especially in our culture. So I'm excited to have a conversation with you about it a little bit.
Yep, me too.
So just starting off, man, what got you really passionate about this in you and your wife's life?
Well, I think it was really a numbers game, and what got me passionate was when I looked at what we owed, and honestly, it was just under half a million total. It kind of blew my mind. We had two mortgages, her student loan debt. I bought a pickup truck, and yeah, it was just a lot. And we each have good incomes. Um, but I don't feel like I was in control. And we were making it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not like we were hurting, but I knew we could have been doing better.
Well, yeah, and that kind of leads me into an area of I wanted to ask you kind of as you've seen and as you've not only got passionate about this in your own life, but as you have branched out and started looking how you can help other people in this. What would you say is the state of most people today financially?
Well, so as we had conversations in the past, I got a lot of my training from Dave Ramsey's website, and I get a lot of my information from him. But I know what he says about it, and I mean, most of America is broke. I mean, they get good incomes, but they're so deep in debt that a lot of times their outgo is more than their income. And I know we are just saturated, I guess, with material possessions, and that's what we're going after. And so I would say that's the state of America is get as much material possessions as you can.
Well, yeah, and like I said, thankfully, I had some mentors early on in life, and a friend of mine said, as he was coming through college, and thankfully I didn't fall into this, but he said, his motto was charge it, it's free, and drink it, it's good. And he's like, that seemed to be the mentality on college. I do remember showing up on a college campus and literally my first day going into the lunchroom, and there were tables lined up with credit card companies, and you would get a free shirt or some kind of trinket or something if you signed up for this credit card. And literally everyone I knew was getting credit cards the first day they get right out of their parents' household, and the first thing they're thrown at is credit cards.
That
And
sounds like a really good spot for somebody to show up with a whip and start overturning tables.
but isn't it crazy? I mean, so not only are we getting shackled with the student loan debt, and that was a thing even with me in college, I was paying for my own school. So I'm not throwing this out there for anybody else, but when I knew that that wasn't going to be the route for me, man, I got out as quick as possible, because I knew that I was going to be paying it. I wasn't disillusioned about the type of money that it takes for that kind of a thing or whatever. But that's another area today that people are just completely shackled down by student loan debt.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't really remember where Katie was at, but she's a veterinarian and it got expensive. And I think her dad even paid for her undergrad and she paid for vet school. So I mean, it was over 100,000.
Yeah, absolutely. I have two friends who are well, they're married, so I'm friends with both of them, but they're both physical therapists, and they came out of school with $100,000 of debt each.
Yep.
And to be honest, I think this is more and more of a reality, as it's a whole nother conversation to get into that we don't need to go down the rabbit trail of the just the push towards people to go into college, into higher education and all these things to I won't go down that rabbit trail, but the reality is people are coming out really, really strapped in debt. And then what's the next couple steps? The next steps is like you talked about, man, you get out of school, you look for hopefully you get a job in your field, which is getting less and less. But the next thing you're told to do is, man, you got to get your cars and you got to get your house, right? So you're going further and further into debt.
That's right. That's right.
Um, so if that's the state, let's start off this conversation with what does the Bible tell us first off about some principles of borrowing and debt?
So, really, and I'm sure you know this, the book of Proverbs is just a wealth of information on all sorts of subjects, but really wealth and living wisely in general. And I, getting ready for this conversation, I went through the chapters. I skimmed over them, wrote down a couple verses, but I do have three overall takeaways from the book of Proverbs that I think really will help shape somebody's worldview, especially as a Christian and looking at finances. My first overall takeaway that I saw was take care of the poor and don't oppress them. We have wealth that God gives us, and it's important to help those who are less fortunate. The next point is to work hard and don't be lazy. Proverbs is full of sayings that if you work hard, you will succeed. You'll make money. But if you're lazy, you're going to come to poverty. So I saw that as another overall theme. And then
Well,
the last one is
if
go
oh,
ahead.
sorry, I was just gonna say, if you don't mind, can we just talk about that one real quick?
Yeah.
Um, do you feel that work ethic is something that holds people back in this area?
Yeah. I mean, well, I mean, I struggle with work ethic, and I think I'm a pretty good worker.
Well,
But
let me
there's
let me
plenty of times where I just feel lazy, and I don't feel like doing anything. But I guess
maybe
that's another rabbit trail.
well maybe let me put it in this realm. I feel like sometimes people come out of college or they come out from somewhere and they're unwilling to take a job that they feel is beneath them, even though it might be something that would help further them along in their life and their finances.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah. And you hear it. I get on social media more than I should, but you hear about the people are entitled. The entitlement generation. Kids not wanting to go to work, and I don't know. That's a whole. You can go you can go pretty far down that subject. But yeah, I mean, I think just we as people we struggle with laziness sometimes, especially in
Yeah,
America. Everything's so easy.
yeah, and for sure, like you said too, and I'll let you move on. It was just something I popped into my head. The scriptures being very clear that if a person doesn't work, he shouldn't eat,
Yeah,
and we are to be known as Christians with an incredible work ethic. Of all people, we should be the ones out there, being whatever your trade is or whatever, but the Bible talks about working with your hands and living a peaceable life, among men.
that's right. That's right. Well, and just going on real quick, my last point is, from what I've seen in Proverbs, money isn't everything. Godliness is. Over and over, it speaks to that. It says, "Don't pursue wealth. Pursue God." In layman's terms, paraphrasing.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And specifically too, the things that kind of always stood out to us, through the scriptures, especially in this area when we got married and we did have some debt and things like that. And again, I was very thankful to have some mentors who taught me this stuff early on as a 19, 20-year old. But the scriptures they're pretty blunt when it comes to the state of the person who is the borrower and who's going into debt. It says that the borrower becomes a slave to the lender.
That's right. Proverbs 22:7.
Yeah. So I think that was something that always stuck out in our mind that we were always remembering that if we owed someone else money, in essence, we were their slave. Like we were going to work on a daily basis, not even for ourselves and for our own, to be able to even provide for ourselves and to give. We were working to pay off other people for a large chunk of time in our life.
Yeah. Yep. And you ain't the only ones.
Right, right. But and then on the flip side of that, the scriptures tell us that that really shouldn't be where we are. We
Yeah.
should be in a place where we are able to give and we're able to be the ones that help others out. I'm thinking of the verse that says, "Owe no man anything but love."
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
I think when you put those two together, the Bible really speaks highly of the freedom that comes with owning yourself and your things and not being in a position where you're without watering it down, a slave to someone else, which that's what debt is.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And well, I'm sure we'll talk about it more, but you hear a lot of excuses. I hear it, as we talked a little bit briefly before we went on the air. I signed up to be a financial coach, and I haven't coached a whole lot of people, but I've had some discussions, and you know, you give them this info, and there's always excuses as to why they want to be in debt. You hear the terms, "Oh, well, I have to have a car, which means I have to have a car payment."
Right.
Or I have to have this, so that means I have to have a credit card, or I have to do X, Y, and Z. Um, I, to me, it's almost kind of like when you're witnessing, people try to justify sin. They're
Oh
trying
yeah.
to justify their ways to stay in debt, and they just have bad info, I think, or an unwillingness to change.
Yeah, and I think there is a lot of pressure that comes from other places because it's very I mean, I just literally recently had this conversation where because my wife and I had some other things come up that were big, like some medical stuff, and we had bought a new van, and so it was a lot that we had to re-get out of debt again. And I remember having a conversation with somebody, I'm not going to drop their name, but there was pressure there of like, listen, you don't have to work so hard at this. Everyone's in debt. Like that was the mentality. Like everybody's in this position. Don't worry about it. It's almost like people have accepted it so much that it's like if you're not in debt, you're weird.
I'm okay with being weird. We're called to be weird.
Oh, for sure, me too. But I think that plays in the conversation sometimes that
Sure.
we literally live in a culture that this is the norm. Like it's normal. You just go, oh yeah, I've got $60,000 in debt, in debt, and it's like I want people hearing this to take a step back and go, listen to what you just said. You
Yeah.
have $60,000 worth of debt to someone else that you may not, unless you change some things, ever pay off in your lifetime.
Yeah. It's crazy.
That is not a biblical place to be.
Nope.
That's a position of slavery. Don't even talk about how we live in the land of the free and the home of the brave if you are shackled in your financial situation because you're not free. You
Yeah.
can't you can't stop working tomorrow and you don't have the options that a free person has because you have become a slave to your lender.
Yeah. Yep. I agree.
All right, so talk to me a little bit. I want to get a little practical here for people. What are some things maybe you guys did as a family to start chipping away at your debt and paying it down? Some general principles, and I figured I could offer some as well, and we could just kind of chat about it.
So I started listening, just brief financial testimony. I started listening to the Dave Ramsey show. I think it was July 2017. Like I said, I had two mortgages. I had the house that we're living in. I had a rental house up in PA that I bought. I had some money left over from deployment. It was a good investment. Dad fixed it up for me. Anyway, had a renter in there. So I was getting income from that. But after listening to Dave for about off and on 6 months, prayed about it, talked to Katie about it. We decided to sell the house because I thought that made good financial sense. And it did. And I don't regret buying it, but I'm so glad we sold it because we actually did not use the debt snowball like he recommends. And I would recommend it to people. We actually sold the house and we went from deep in baby step 2, which is pay off your debt, to 4, 5, and 6, which I mean, we paid off the rest of that mortgage, her student loans, and I had a Ram 2016 diesel. I mean, it was a $40,000 truck. I paid that off. Plus, we had
Awesome.
money in our emergency fund. So anyway, like I'm saying, we made a good financial decision, and we skipped a lot of steps. And then I ended up selling the truck because I couldn't justify driving that around either. So I sold everything. But
Y Yeah. No,
yeah,
and I
so what I
uh,
would recommend, again, is get a small emergency fund set in place, like $1,000, because what you don't want to do is, have something pop up and you just swipe your credit card and now you're deeper in debt. So we follow the baby steps. I know you're familiar with them, but
yeah,
just for
no
our listeners, baby step one is save $1,000 as an emergency fund as quick as you can. I mean, do a yard sale if you have to, sell some other stuff. Stop going out to eat that month, but get that $1,000 as quick as you can. And then baby step two is pay off all non-mortgage debt. So that's anything from credit cards to cars, um, student loans, what have you. There's all sorts of debt out there. And again, you're going at this with an intense focus, starting with the smallest and then working your way toward the biggest. And I won't go into all the details just for the sake of time.
Well, if you don't mind,
Go
I
ahead.
can I just chat about that real quick because
Yes,
that
sir.
was something as we had stuff come up, we had to do that a little bit and we followed after kind of the snowball effect. And I think for most people, it's the opposite of what you would think. So most people look at their debts and they see the biggest one and they're like, well, I want to pay that off, like, because that's the biggest one.
Hmm.
And what the snowball effect would say is actually what you want to do is you want to pick your smallest debts out and you want to knock them out because you want to get little wins. And not only will you get little wins, but if you're paying $100 a month on a certain debt and it's a smaller debt, but you pay it off, you now have an extra $100 that you could put towards that next big debt, and you could pay that one off twice as fast because of the resources that you continue to gather. And as just say you have four debts and you pick off two of them. Now you take the money that on a monthly basis that was going out for those two, and you now apply that to the third one. And now your snowball gets bigger and bigger, and you're able to pay these off faster and faster.
Yep, that's right. And the psychology behind it is you'll actually get more motivated when you see the little ones start to die away, and it helps you continue the process too.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've noticed that in our own lives as we had some stuff. So yeah, and like I said, it's like anything, any discipline in your life. You play sports, you do whatever. Those little wins create that momentum, and not just in the physical realm, but also like you were talking about within yourself. It motivates you to continue. You're seeing results, so you even want to pump the gas even more.
I know we're doing that right now with our mortgage, and Katie's ready to strangle me. So,
But
but
hey, that's some of the stuff you got to do as a family. You got
yep,
to make those hard decisions. You got to clamp down sometimes. And even though you might want to do some other stuff, there's an important thing in front of you, right?
yep, that's right.
That's the other thing too. I think people what my I'll just speak for me. What my wife and I had to do is we had to look at our financial situation and go, this is a priority to us. Being debt free, owning our lives, owning ourselves, not being a slave to anyone else is a big enough priority that we are going to put some things on the back burner. We're going to make some decisions that are challenging right now or maybe uncomfortable right now for the greater good because it matters not just to us, but I believe it matters to God. I think he wants us living in a place where we're free.
I agree. And well, it'll be a really important thing to model for your kids as they see, mom and dad working hard and being good stewards. That'll just model good behavior for them too.
Oh yeah, and also too, um, the scriptures say, in Ephesians 4, it talks about like the person who used to steal. Not only should he not steal anymore, but it says that he should work with his hands and create a living so that he has something to give. And I feel like too, if you would just take the amount of money that goes out of your household, if you would draw it out and look at your budget and look at the different numbers of debts that you're paying off and the monthly payments of those, can you just imagine that when you pay all that stuff off, how much more you not only can go a little bit into savings and maybe a little bit into, lifestyle, if that's what you do a little bit there too. But how much more are you going to be able to give to the cause of Christ where it should be going?
Yeah, yeah, and that's it. And that's, I fully buy into Ramsey's plan here, especially with the finances. But his baby step 7 is build wealth and give. And so that's where Katie and I are working toward. We have to pay off the mortgage, and then we'll be in baby step 7. We won't owe anybody anything. But that is the plan: is to build wealth and give. I mean, and wealth is, to me, I think that's a personal question as to what's wealth. To me, if I eat, that day I'm pretty wealthy. Like
Oh
I
yeah, for sure.
don't eat all the kinds of crazy stuff, but
Yeah. Okay, so there's a couple just notes that I made over what we were talking about, things that we've done, sounds like things you did. Maybe let's get real practical. Let's
yeah.
zoom in. The first principle that I wrote down was there is an essence of when you get serious about this, I'll say we did. We downgraded the lifestyle from what we thought we had to live to what we actually needed to live so that we could make the best use out of all of our resources.
Hmm.
So I'll let you know for us, I'm not saying anyone else has to do this, but when we got really serious about this, we got rid of we became a blank slate and stopped thinking about what does everybody else have, what are things they do, and we said what do we need, almost even bare minimum. And so we went down to one car so that we had no more car payments. I sold a car and then we survived for about 3 years on one car. Was it uncomfortable? Absolutely. Did we have times where it was a pain instead of a blessing? Absolutely. But we were that serious about it. So we actually got rid of a car. Um, Another thing we did, and again, I'm not saying anybody else has to do this, but we wanted more money coming in and more options available so that we could really pay this stuff down really quick. We had someone, and we had the extra space. Thank the Lord. But we had someone move in with us to pay us rent so that we had more money coming into our household. We had an extra room, and so even though that was uncomfortable sometimes there was somebody else living with us, it allowed us to have more expendable income, to
Yeah,
be able to pay some of these things off.
yeah,
We
that's a really good thing. Any sort of side money, I think, is huge for anybody, not just, well, I mean, really people trying to get out of debt, but even I've got, the side hustle, as Dave calls it. I've got
Yeah,
the farm going on.
yeah,
I try to work extra jobs here and there because I like to work. It's enjoyable. And it is nice to work and then get paid for that work.
yeah.
Uh, so
Yeah, and we're in the same boat too, and we are, in this process. My wife quit her job when we started having kids, so we were able to come tens of thousands of dollars out of debt. And I'm not being like whatever, but we were able to come tens of thousands of dollars out of debt while my wife was not, like, she had quit her job. You know what I mean? And we had one primary main income with some other side stuff and everything like that as well. And a lot of it was, what else we made decisions to, we stopped going out to eat. Like we would rarely spend money that was luxury based instead of necessity based.
yeah, yeah, I know that. Well, it's not a huge thing, but even in our monthly budget, I mean, we budget for it, and I mean, we spend it each month. But yeah, I mean, if we cut that out, we'd have an extra couple $100 each month, and
Yep.
so yeah, that's awesome.
And again, I'm just throwing some stuff out there because there's another principle called delayed gratification. that I was taught early on that has helped my life in so many areas, that if you have a goal or you've got something that you're working towards, you don't have to have this instant gratification. And I think that's where a lot of people get in trouble in their finances, is they see something they want and they just go out and they charge it instead of waiting until they're actually able to get it.
Yeah, yep. Well, it's the culture we live in.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about, get it now and pay for it later.
Yeah. And so that was one thing that as we went along, even when it came to the eating out and the movie nights or whatever it was, the vacations. My wife and I, and again, I'm not saying you guys got to make this decision, whatever. We delayed vacations for years. We the only vacations we would go on in that time period where we were blitzing it to get debt free was if someone like I'll be honest, our family was like, you guys aren't like, you're not taking vacation, you're not doing anything, we'll pay, we'll take you. And then we're like, okay. And whatever, that's on you, as long if it's a gift and there's no strings attached or whatever, we'll come with you. But we're in a season right now where we're delaying gratify, not so that we don't ever take vacations again, but until we hit the goals that we set, we were going to be dogmatic about getting ourselves in a better financial position.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, you look through scripture. There's plenty of times and seasons, if you will. Um, you know, there's the way it just came to mind while you were talking, like fasting. I mean, you fast for a couple, days, whatever it is. You delay, that food to draw closer to God. Um, Same similar thing. You delay all this good stuff, to meet a goal, and then the end's much sweeter. So
Yeah. And then you're in a better place. Absolutely.
yeah,
With your life, with your family, you know, and it was cool for us because even in the midst of some of that stuff, as we, back down and we got rid of a car and we stuck it out, for all this stuff. Now we're in a position where, and I'm not being whatever, and don't hear me, like it's like whatever. But now we own three vehicles. I mean, it's we own a motorcycle and two cars. We have no debt to anyone. We were able to pay off a bunch of. We had some medical debt come up. We had I had a some business debt of some things that I was doing and everything like that we were able to pay off. But it being able to get yourself in that position where now you not only have the resources to do, now you can go out to eat and you're not guilty, you're not charging it, you know what I mean, you're not, now you can go take the vacation and you're not coming back all stressed out because now you got to figure out how to pay $2,000 off on your credit card, or your your monthly payment went up an extra 50 to $90, and you're going, man, how are we going to get groceries this week?
yeah, yeah. Real struggles.
Seriously. Yeah. So cool. Anything else you could think of as far as maybe some decisions that you made? I like the what you talked about. I have mentors in my own life that help people all the time in this area, and one of the biggest areas that they talk about was what you said. A lot of people have gone and they've bought a truck that they really like, but honestly, right now they shouldn't have it because
Yeah,
you should not be $90,000 in debt over the F-350 four-door, you know, big muscle truck that you think you need when let's be honest, you cannot afford it.
yeah. So, and that's the second best decision I ever made, was selling that truck. Like I said, when we sold the house, I had that Ram, big diesel truck. 45, or I bought it for 45. Got a really good deal. But anyway, it was paid for. I mean, it was paid off, but I was
Yeah.
still driving it around, and
Yep.
I was like, I am not hauling cattle yet. I'm not towing anything, and I'm too scared to use it like a pickup truck. So I sold it. I sold it to a dealer for 38.8, and the same day I bought an old '96 F-250 with a Power Stroke diesel, um, for like 5,500. And
Yeah.
so all that money that I made on that truck, I put toward the mortgage because I've got to get out of this house or this mortgage before I get out of the army. So I got 7 years.
Yeah. Well,
So
and then the truck, became an asset for you. You
yeah,
know what I mean? Yep.
huge. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's decisions like that sometime, and I believe everybody should find someone in their life that is debt free and find somebody in their life that has done these kind of things and talk to them. And so one of the biggest things in our lives that again through mentorship we've always done is that I find no one else. I talk to people all the time about this, and even pastoring, I'm getting better. It's funny because I always used to separate this and so before I stepped into ministry, I had done a lot of work in business and different things like that. And so I had these mentors in my life who had poured in a lot of principles and ideas into me that we've been able to implement in our life. Um, but I almost disconnected it from my ministry. And how foolish was I to do that? Because even in pastoral ministry now, as I talk to people, I just counseled a couple with premarital counseling and things like that. And when we came together and talked, we talked finances and we talked about how this is going to matter in your life and in your family. And I want you guys to come back to me with your budget. I want you to put a number to every expenditure that you have. And you need to know everything that comes in and out of your household because, one, if you're in debt, you shouldn't be, according to the scriptures. And two, you need to know these things and stay on these things. Another principle through Proverbs, it says to be diligent to know the state of your flocks, and I get it that that's talking in a farm culture and everything like that. But what that general equity of that principle is, you need to know what's going on in your household and in your finances. What are your assets? Or if you all you have is liabilities, we need to start making some changes in your life.
Yeah, I agree. And that's something that, well, practically, Katie and I do it every month. And I know it drives her nuts because I'm the nerd of the family and I make sure we do it. And I'm always on the Excel spreadsheet and write numbers down. But anyway, we have a app called Every Dollar. It's actually Ramsey's app. Um, and it's synced to both of our phones. So whenever we spend something, we put it in and I I see what she spends. She sees what I spend. We don't have a problem with that. I know some people might. We don't.
You shouldn't
Um,
if you're married. I'm just
yeah,
gonna throw
yeah.
it
I
out
mean,
there.
we
You
get it.
absolutely should not be hiding anything and
That's
should
right.
not have a problem with that. And if you do, you might want to start there.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so this app's pretty good. Sometimes we'll go a little over, but it's not a big deal. We're pretty close to what we make. But yeah, I mean, if you're getting out of debt, you got to be straight. No more than what you budget for. You've got to be disciplined if you're trying to get out of debt.
And let me also throw in there, I do want to throw that this didn't mean that we never did anything fun or as a couple or as a family, because as strict as we were though too, we also did, like, there are things that are worth an investment into, when it comes down to it. Like for us, okay, so I said we stopped going, out to eat and everything. We stopped going out to eat all the time or regularly. We did have a date night every now and then, you know what I mean, where we did something nice together because we needed that as a couple. So I just wanted to clarify that, because as you were talking about that a little bit too, you do work those things into your budget as well. Especially if you have a family too, you've got to do things. Now you can tighten up and you can do different kind of things, but you should be doing some things. And I'm not talking about being just, straight up never doing anything or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Well, okay. So as we were kind of talking about that, maybe, so, I mean, we kind of gave a bunch of practical tips in there. I'm just thinking off the top of my head if there was anything else I could think of, but what are maybe some hurdles? Can you think of some hurdles that people would need to watch out for?
Yeah. Just off the top of my head, you know, they have the whole thing called Murphy's Law, or, life happens. Sometimes when you're getting started, life is going to happen and it's going to you're going to want to quit. Well, the Bible talks about diligency. I can't quote the verse off the top of my head, but it basically says be diligent. And so, if, for example, something pops up and you have to pay for it, well, I mean, you have to pay for it. Um, but keep going. Don't quit. Even if you have to swipe your card because it's emergency and you're just getting started, well, I mean, there's grace there.
Yeah.
Get through it, tighten down the budget, and keep going.
Yeah.
So I think the initial little emergencies, could be a hurdle. I think the biggest hurdle maybe is husbands and wives not being on the same page. And you're going to have disagreements. I mean, every single month, Katie and I sit down, we do the budget, and we don't disagree, but well, we don't argue. We do disagree about some things, and we compromise. That's a marriage, and so, but I mean, we figure it out. Uh, Getting out of debt is going to be a stressful life change, and so you just got to realize that, and you got to show each other grace. So especially as these disagreements come, love your wife like Christ loved the church, and wives submit to your husbands. I mean, that's as simple as I can make it. But that could be a hurdle, disagreements.
I think that's a really good one, is making sure that the home front is on the same page.
Hmm.
And that
Well,
kind
and
because
the
that'll
big thing, don't just look at your, as we say in the Army, your 5 meter target. You got to look to the end game, and what are you trying to get toward?
right.
Because that'll help you stay focused on knocking out the little stuff.
Yeah, which again was somewhat of why I brought up the point of, hey, listen, you might have, I don't know, different people are wired different ways, and that's the other thing. Your family, and I'm not telling you to make excuses and get sloppy with it and everything like that, but certain people, it like for you to love your wife, like I get this. Certain people are wired that their love tank is filled, you know, with time together or doing an activity or something like that. And husbands, you got to be wise about that. If your wife needs a dinner alone with you, you know, go work some extra, go figure it out so that you could go provide that for her because your relationship matters. If you get out of debt and your relationship falls apart in the process, you've still lost. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right. Marriage is, well, in my opinion, marriage is more important than money. You know, that's
It absolutely is. But I will also throw on there, your marriage will be better when you're debt free.
yeah, when you're both on the same page. Yeah.
And you're on the same page. And listen, sometimes if you guys have been used to frivolously spending and things like that, there will be tough conversations. This is why I recommend you find somebody to be accountable to. Find somebody who's debt free, a debt free couple in your life, in your church, somewhere that you guys can confide in and be accountable to. Because listen, when you put those credit cards away and when you start making decisions that are challenging, it boy, it's all you'll be surprised. It's like an addiction. You will have growing pains and you will have withdrawal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we got on the wagon. We cut up our credit cards. Katie still has one, but we won't tell everybody, even though
Well,
it's still in
I
my.
I mean, there's certain things, and I wasn't gonna fully get into this, but when you start talking about building wealth, when you get out of debt, you open up more options,
Oh yeah.
especially with credit cards. And again, guys, don't hear me wrong. I'm going to clarify this. Credit cards can become an asset. Most credit cards give you points and cash back. If you pay those credit cards off and you're diligent with the use of them, they turn into an asset. So there's nothing inherently wrong necessarily about the right kind of credit card to put to make your expenses on, as long as you're paying it off, as long as you're doing it the responsible, wealthy way, because then come the end of the year, as you've paid that off every month, you now have created an asset that every dollar you've spent on that, you get 3% back or 2% back or whatever. My wife and I, that's how we handle Christmas at the end of the year because we don't have debt. We pay the stuff off and then we get 2% back on all the stuff we put on it. And by the end of the year, we've got hundreds of dollars stored up that was free money and asset money that because we were responsible, we now have extra money to give.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And yeah, I mean, I can't judge anybody for paying them off. I just know, from what Dave says, he gives the broad strokes of, hey, get rid of them because most people don't have that discipline. But yeah, I
Oh,
mean, if you have that discipline, yeah, rock it.
oh yeah. And I'm talking after this is an after this is, once you're out of debt, once you're responsible, once you built some financial muscles and good responsibility muscles, that's an option that exists. That
That's
again,
right.
if you're in debt, that's not even an option for you because you're too busy, spinning your hamster wheel around the interest rate.
Yeah, yeah, for real.
And let me just throw this out there. Those rewards cards you guys have, if you're in debt on them, you're not getting rewards back. You like you're paying more interest than you are actually getting rewards if you are not paying them off, So I listen, I've been there. I've gone, but this is a rewards card, I get 2% back every time. Yet I was carrying a $2,000 balance and I was paying more in interest than I was getting back in the reward.
Yeah, it's bad math, is what it is.
It's bad math. Yeah, but you got to be aware of it, like because again, these are some of the hurdles everybody tells you, "Oh, it's a rewards card. It's a good thing." Well, it's a good thing if you use it the right way.
Hmm. Yep, yep. I was trying to think of some more hurdles. I'm sure one will come to me.
Well, I think keeping up with the Joneses sometimes I think you
Yeah.
really got to put your blinders on when it comes to this and realize, listen, you're running your race. Stop running other. I mean, we live in a social media world where we just think we know everybody's business and we get everybody's best side, thrown at us on a daily basis. We see, our friends from high school looks, that we don't even talk to anymore, but oh, it looks like they go on vacation all the time. And their kids look like they got all the coolest new stuff. And then all of a sudden we start making decisions in our own lives based upon a perception of social media that isn't reality, and two, has nothing to do with our own life.
Yeah, yeah, it's a thing, or do you think it's like just a wealthy people thing? And
I'm
I'd say we're wealthy. I don't care how poor you are in America. I think you're wealthy. I mean, if you
Yeah.
compare yourself to the rest of the, third world countries.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. So I think a hurdle is taking those blinders off. Just is getting caught up in keeping up with the Joneses. I've seen that as a hurdle. How about this? You have a sister or a brother that goes out and buys a house, and then you start feeling the need to like do make a decision like that or something, even though you're not ready for it. Or a friend gets a new car, and all of a sudden your car's not looking as nice as it used to be. And so you're like, well, we can afford the monthly payments. Listen, that's not what we're talking about affording. It's affording the monthly payments is not you being in a position to afford that car.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what we fell into. I mean, that's what most people fall into. You can
So,
afford the payments, but
yeah,
it's
I'm
not the
sorry. This
same.
is something I could go off on too because, I just again, I've praise God, I've had some mentorship in my life in this area, but also too been able to apply things and see so much of just different things we've felt the urge to fall into, and in some cases we did fall into at times and had to dig ourselves out and stuff like that too. So
Yeah. So if I can put you on the hot seat for a minute,
yeah.
if we can shift this, because I've had this thought the past, well, a little bit. Um, I guess get less practical, more theological, but if you can turn it into practical, you know, I'd ask you, what's the chief end of man?
Well, if I'm giving you my Westminster Confession
Westminster, yeah,
answer.
and to glorify God and enjoy Him forever, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Well,
so,
yeah. By exalting, loving, and serving Jesus Christ, which is my new covenant answer.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, we'll have to talk more about that too later. But anyway, so solo Deo Gloria,
Yeah.
to God be the glory. That encompasses your entire life in which we're talking about finances. And so finances fall into that. And I think a lot of this will go into worldview. And it's worldview is kind of a subject I've been studying a little bit lately, and what is our worldview supposed to be as followers of Christ? Because we are not of this world. We are called out. And we're called out for a reason, is to glorify God. And so with our finances, what are we doing with that? And I think if you can get the right biblical worldview and put God first in everything, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. If you can put him first in all of that, your finances will take care of themselves. Like you still have to be a good steward, but you'll use the money correctly.
Yeah.
And I don't see debt as being glorifying to God in any sense. And I mean, I'm not trying to be a hypocrite because we have a mortgage on this place.
Well,
But
I'm not being whatever, but just for the audience, you
yeah.
do know what mortgage means, right? Like mortgage comes from the word death grip, like
Oh, I didn't know that.
mort engage
Yeah, that makes sense.
is death grip. So, but it truly is for many people.
Yeah, so I mean, but our end state here, Katie and I, and I mean, just for the audience, we bought a 47-acre farm 2.5 years ago down here in Alabama, and I've got 7 years left in the army. The idea is to pay that out, get out of the army, and I don't know what I'm going to do. I would like to be either a farming preacher or a preaching farmer. Um, I think either one would be fine, but we'll see what God has for us. But anyway, if we can be debt free, then any income that comes in to include her paycheck, military retirement, any other career I start, that money could literally go to whatever I guess God would have for us to give to. And I'm pretty passionate about missions. Again, we're given the Great Commission. Our job is to go and make disciples as followers of Christ, and I that includes our money. I mean, I can't personally, and this is my own view, I can't personally see having millions of dollars laid up when people need the gospel. And I'm not saying that to judge anybody. I don't see it for myself. Um, I don't know. This life's short. I don't want to go out with millions in my bank account.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because there's definitely a balance in the scriptures of that too, that it talks about, a wise man leaves an inheritance for his children and he builds some kind of a legacy. And again, I mean, you would have to ask yourself that question. Think ahead a little bit. What are you going to leave for your kids based on the decisions you're making now? Are you going to leave them a bunch of debt? Because the scripture doesn't look fond upon that. Um, but then too, there's a balance in even the parable of Jesus where he talks about the man who, built his storehouses and he stored everything in there. And the Bible says, you fool, tonight your night was required of you. You were building all this stuff for yourself and it was worthless. So I've always used those two little sections to balance me out of knowing, man, I got to take care of my family and have stuff for them and everything. But at the same time, I want to live in such a way that I am ready to either go to the Lord or for him to return at any moment. And that means I'm not hoarding and building my own kingdom in any way, whether it be financially or with people and relationships or whatever. But everything I do, and you summed it up perfectly, and maybe we can end on this unless you have anything else on this topic, is we have to start asking ourselves the question, is whatever I'm doing right now or the things that the decisions I'm making, am I bringing glory to Christ with these things? Your finances are not yours. The Bible says you yourself are not your own. You have been bought with a price. And then it also says in, Romans 12, therefore offer yourselves as living sacrifices. So our entire lives are given to Jesus. And that includes, by extension, all the resources he's given us, including our finances. So we need to make sure that we want to be found faithful stewards when we see him.
Yeah, I agree. And I just, just to clarify, there's nothing wrong with having wealth, but what are you doing with it?
Oh, for
You know?
sure. For sure. Well, and the scriptures speak to that too. Paul tells Timothy, he said, encourage the rich among you. So he doesn't tell them, the rich are evil or they're wrong or whatever. He goes, what are you supposed to do to the rich? How do you teach them? He says, encourage the rich to be rich in good works and to be rich in giving. So that's the balance. I mean, God gives the ability to create wealth, and that happens many times, but your job as you create wealth or as it's given to you by God is to steward it just like somebody who doesn't have as much wealth. You are going to be responsible for what you've been given. You will stand before God and give an account. And so the wealthy person, our greatest encouragement to you is use that for the glory of God.
Yeah, that's right.
So awesome, man. Well, do you have any wrapping up thoughts? I really enjoyed this conversation and how everything went. Anything lastly you want to offer?
Nope, I think I'm good. And I enjoyed the conversation a lot too.
And if anybody wants to reach out to you, do you want to throw out there? I didn't tell you I was going to do this. Do you want them to connect with you anywhere or email or anything?
Yeah, that's fine. So I have a website. It's called mcmasterfinancialcoach.com. And then all my contact information's on there. You can check it out, click through it, and then if you want to reach out, yeah, email or phone call is the best. So,
Okay, awesome. Well, I appreciate it, Kyle. Thanks so much for being on with me. You know what? I've had you on twice now. If I get you on a third time, you'll have the record for the most returning. I have a handful of people that have been on twice so far.
oh man, I'm honored.
All
Let's
right,
do it.
brother.
Let's
Well,
plan something.
take care, man, and God bless.
Yep. See you.